Yes, I see them. I see it. Yeah, also in presentation mode. Yes, thanks.
Awesome. I'm always nervous at this stage. Just to say thank you, Jana, and the coordinators for inviting us to speak about our Lighthouse activities. We hope we meet your what you thought you would get. And so I'm going to be talking about the WCRP Academy, and I'm a co-chair of the Academy. My co-chair is Angela Maharaj. She is at University of New South Wales in Australia. I'm at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And yeah, just to give you a little bit of background. If you go to the WCRP Academy website, you'll see this first sentence: now more than ever, the world needs climate experts. I hope you disagree, because if you're not a climate scientist, I hope that you think the world needs your discipline the most. But in the context of climate science and climate scientists, particularly in developing countries, we have very few competent climate scientists. So there's a need to develop and train and develop capacity within our developing nations. There's a large amount of training material out there. You just have to know where it is, and that's the difficult part. So if we could coordinate access to the training that already exists and maybe help in the development of future training, we believe that it would benefit those who are looking to really capacitate and upskill themselves in the context of climate science analysis and climate science in general. So as the WCRP Academy, we think that the provision of climate science training could actually be made more efficient and more sustainable by connecting providers of training with consumers of training. So people who want training with people who can provide that type of training. However, there are barriers to climate science training, particularly in our southern contexts, but more generally, there's this one. No one institution can provide complete training that modern climate scientists require. If you see something like one-stop shop for climate science training, move right along, because there's no such thing. I actually think you'll see on the WCRP Academy the phrase one-stop shop. But don't move along, carry on reading. But if someone's offering climate science training as a one-stop shop, there's no such thing. But then also another barrier is that climate science training could be made more useful if it's designed with the impact of climate change and variability on society in mind. So again, being not necessarily starting in society, but certainly being aware of how climate change and variability may impact society. That's often not done in climate science. We just blinkered on the climate system. And then also there are barriers to the access of training. These are primarily geographical and financial. So in our developing world contexts, I'm in South Africa, it's often not because we don't want to or because we don't have the skill, the prior learning. It's just because we don't have the money to pay for this. And then also we're far away from everything. At the southern tip of Africa, it's difficult to travel to, like in UK and in Europe, we can't just hop on a train and go to another country. Then also the training at the scale that is required, and some of this came up in the previous talks before the WCRP session, scale is really important. The regional scale is really important. So it's important for the next generation of scientists to actually be able to work at scales that are important for society. And that's what we recognize. Then the last barrier is financial, it's funding. So how do we pay to become skilled in our climate science as climate scientists or people who want to develop our climate science? It's not for free. We've got to go on courses. Who's going to pay for it? Is it government? Is it our institutions? Is it philanthropic grants? And these are all various barriers to actually being able to get trained and get skilled up in climate science. So this is where the WCRP Academy is trying to step in. And that's in facilitating the training of future generations of climate scientists. You'll hear me speaking mostly from a developing nation context, but it's not just developing nations, we're also talking about developed nations. So if you imagine, we have climate researchers who need training. They want to be skilled in particular methodologies or particular types of analyses, or I want to be able to run a climate model, whatever that is. You then will have another community who would be able to provide training to develop that skill. And what the WCRP Academy is trying to do, is join these two communities, bring these two communities together so that there can be this interaction and linkage to facilitate an upskilling of the communities. And this is not just the one way. It's not just training providers being able to skill developing nation scientists. It's actually going to go the other way too. Developing nation scientists do have something to offer to the folk who are providing this training. So we see this as a two-way, not just from training providers to those developing nation scientists. We definitely see it both ways, going both ways. So the WCRP Academy sees itself as a marketplace or a hub for climate science training. And one of the tools we use is a stock take, an annual stock take. So we want to, with this annual stock take, try and sample and find out where these two communities are, what they look like, who they consist of, and what the different offers are or requirements for climate science training are, and who the providers might be. And we're doing this in two phases. The first is an inward-facing phase where we're looking just within the World Climate Research Program, because there are many training activities within the WCRP, but they've not been mapped out yet. So this is the first part of what we're trying to do is figure out actually what's going on inside the WCRP already. Once we've done that, then we do an outward facing phase where we then try and sample the world and try and figure out, so ask the world climate scientists or researchers in climate these questions. What are your needs? What would you like to be trained in? Who can provide the training? What can you provide? And then bring that all together. We have a timeline of quite a long time. We're setting it up in the first 2 years. We're in year 2 at the moment. And we see the Academy lasting for between 5 and 10 years. And I'll show you a bit more about that later. This is the group of people who've been tasked to do this. It's Angela and myself. And we are supported by Beatrice and Narelle of the WCRP Secretariat, who, if we didn't have them, the whole thing would just fall flat. So we're very grateful for that. And then the rest of the team is drawn from all over the world, really. There's developed nation representatives, developing nation reps, and they are all involved in the WCRP, so they'll all have some activity. They'll be linked to some activity within the WCRP. As I said, we've got a 2-year timeline for implementation, so we've got to lay the foundation in these 2 years of what we're going to build for the next 10 years. And we have 3 working groups that I'll break down in a moment, whose job it is to do this. Once we get beyond this foundation phase, we see that this bunch of people will rotate, and some will rotate off. New folk will come in. There'll be new ideas, new blood coming in every year or so. Last year, we met every second month. It was quite exhausting because we're a global team. So having a 4 a.m. meeting is not the best thing in the world. And we've scaled that down this year to 4 meetings per year to get this going, because we've made that first bump. Our responsibilities as the chairs, myself and Angela, we largely are the link between the WCRP leadership and the partners and then the group, and then also communications and outreach. So Jana sent an email saying, do you guys want to come talk? And we go, yay, we do, because we want folk to know about what the Academy is about. We have 3 working groups. The first working group is the stock take group. I belong to this group, and our goal, or our aim, is to identify those 2 communities, the training, who needs training and who can provide training. Long term, we want to figure out how to operationalize this. How can we do it smoothly every year? Maybe it must be done every second year. And currently we did the stock take last year. It ended in December, and we're going through the data at the moment. And I'll show you some of the results from the stock take in a moment too. Working group 2 is the identity group. So they're responsible for establishing the brand, the WCRP Academy brand. It's the outward facing, the website, how this is going to look to someone who comes in, a climate scientist who wants training in a particular field. And yeah, it's largely developing the website side of this. And what they're doing currently is thinking about what do we require in order to build this type of portal, or kind of linking portal. Then very importantly, the third working group is about finance. And here they're establishing the business model for the Academy, because this is going to cost money. How do we sustain it for 5 to 10 years? Because the WCRP is not super wealthy, and we need to try and figure out how to do this long term. So they're currently looking at different organizations who might be able to fund this type of activity. Our timeline is 2021, 2022, 2023. So in 2021, most of what we did was the stock take and a little bit of looking at finances. In 2022, the identity group and the finance group will come online a lot more than what they have been because now we have a product, we've got the stock take, we're doing the analysis of the stock take at the moment. This has also meant we have expanded the team. We started off relatively small, but we have now Beatrice with us at the WCRP Secretariat. And then also two consultants, one consultant from South Africa and the other from the Philippines. And this is to help us, A, look at the stock take, so do the statistics on the stock take, and B, help us with the development of the portal. And they all support the work of the Academy, and they really are important. I'll take you very briefly through the stock take. We got 414, I think, complete and unique responses. There were a lot that didn't finish because it was a very long and very arduous survey that we did, but it's given us some insight into how to do it and also how not to do it. And we're starting with the analysis now, and we will hopefully publish this in a journal, something like BAMS. Overall, the Global South were better represented than the Global North in terms of filling in the survey, which is unusual, but we're very pleased to see that. And then by gender, 200, again, more males filled in the survey than females, but the gap was not as big as what we thought it might be. So we were surprised but happy about that it wasn't a massive gap. 6 people identified as non-binary and 6 others preferred not to say. Then the top countries that responded, Brazil topped out at 50, yay, well done Brazil. And then the US, UK, Australia, and we went down a bit there. What were the respondents affiliated with? What was the institution? So university by far, most respondents were at a university or at a research center or with a government agency. So it was definitely a very niche group that we sampled most of. So it's research, really. Some of the questions, so we looked at the North-South divide, and we asked this question: what would you like? Would you like to access additional climate science training or education? Everyone in the South said yes, so all Southern countries or Southern respondents said yes, and there were some Northern respondents who said, no, it's fine. And this, as a Southern person, surprised me. I didn't realize there were people out there who thought they knew it all. Then, in your opinion, is the climate science training you're getting adequate for what you want to do? Most, again, as you would expect, more people in the Global South said, no, I definitely need more training, and more. But there were folk in the Global North who also said, yes, I do need more training. Then we asked, what about obstacles to the provision of adequate climate science training and education in your country? And respondents could choose from a list that we thought up and consulted on. And you can see by far the biggest one is financial barriers. So a lot of, and this is purely Southern, I should say, these results, we drill down into the Southern countries or Southern recipients, Southern respondents, and this is what came out from the data from them. And financial barrier is the biggest in terms of how can I skill myself up? What can I do? And then followed quite a long way by lack of expertise, technical limitations, and some others. What are the most important climate process-based training areas that you need? And this is interesting to me. But most Southern folks said the analysis of model results other than model evaluation. So Southern climate scientists are wanting to move on from these first order, very broad-based correlation types analyses to more second, third, and fourth order analyses. And that's very encouraging, but we need to be able to train or create the environment where they can actually develop those skills to do that kind of work. And then general training areas, what would you like? And coming up towards it, or at the top, was coding. I want to learn Python. I want to know how to run these data through using Python and analyze using Python. Then capacity development and exchange was also a big one, to go on exchange programs, to go to somewhere, learn, and then come back to my institution and apply as I can. And then linking that to the CAR network was really, I think it's interesting because this is talking about emergent risks and extreme events and providing an open platform. And this is kind of where climate scientists also need to be. And the nice thing about this is it's scientific communities and engineering and different types of communities working together within this network. And I think for the moment, the Academy is focused on more climate science. We want to develop climate scientists. But as I went through the program and picked out these things, a lot of these things, the ones in red and maybe even the ones in black, I don't know. Climate scientists do need to know about, they can contribute to the understanding, and they need to know about all of these things that I've listed here. There are going to be more. So climate scientists need to be approachable by other communities, such as represented here in the CAR network, and also be willing to be trained in some ways, or sensitized at least in that. So it's really important that we start, even as we saw in the My Climate Risks talk, to start moving across disciplines, not just becoming multidisciplinary, but to start thinking about becoming transdisciplinary also. So if you have any questions about the Academy, just Google WCRP Academy, or you can fire an email off to that email there, and that will get to myself, Angela, Nora, and Beatrice. Thank you very much. Thank you again for having us here.